Hello, friends, and welcome to yet another lecture on 20th century English poetry. I'm Professor Payal Nagpal and teach English in Janki Devi Memorial College. And today I will be discussing a very radical, very interesting poet, Gertrude Stein. Gertrude Stein is a 20th century English poet, and today I will be discussing stanzas and meditation with you. Here's a photograph of Gertrude Stein. She was born in 1874 and lived up to 1946. Now, Stein was born in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, and from Pennsylvania, she shifted to Vienna, then California. But it is Paris, really speaking, that gave her breadth as a writer, and she stayed on in Paris once she moved there in 1903, which is quite early. So, and this, of course, is extremely poignant because the writer we are discussing today, Gertrude Stein, is a Jewish writer. And a very important and a very interesting aspect about her is that she actually hosted a salon which was home to some very eminent modernist writers and artists. Artists such as Pablo Picasso, writers like Ernest Hemingway, Ezra Pound, then of course the artist Henry Matisse, and so on. She was, of course, a novelist, a writer, a poet, but interestingly, Gertrude Stein was also an art collector, and she and her brother Leo, they were one of the first ones actually to collect work done by artists like Picasso and Matisse. So here, it's interesting to see in Gertrude Stein's life the connection between writing and art. Another reason why Gertrude Stein is very important is that with Stein we also kind of ask some very important questions about the style of writing. So where in the 19th century, when you read a poem, the poem, is something that you're able to understand because it, in a sense, at one level, objectively, the poet reflects the things around, and the poet also reflects on the things around. And these could be thoughts, these could be observations about life. So, pretty much, especially in the 19th century, there is what we call a realist strain in writing. This trend of realism in poetry, in fiction, runs right through the 19th century. But when we come to a writer, the American writer who moves to France, here in her work, we see a very different trend. And this trend, of course, resonates with the time in which she was writing. So, if we had to talk about modernist writing in the novel, we look towards writers like Virginia Woolf and James Joyce. But if we have to look at poetry, then of course we look at T.S. Eliot, but we also need to look at a poet like Gertrude Stein, because her writing is, it represents that trend of high modernism. So, Stein returned to America in 1934, and after a gap of about 30 years, and then she gave a series of lectures in America. If one were to actually look at some important aspects of her life, her writing, she worked with the psychologist William James, who was her mentor, and she worked on what was called normal motor automatism. The reason why one is mentioning this is because there was something at that point of time that was called automatic writing. The idea being that just as there are impulsive movements. Similarly, in writing, there is a trend of automatic writing, and one of her own works was attributed to this. However, she did work with William James on this, but Gertrude Stein always rejected this when it came to writing. So, where she worked on normal motor automatism, but Stein felt that when it comes to writing, at that point, there is no impulsive writing like this, because she felt that writing is very complex, and to reduce it simply to an impulse would not be appropriate. Even though at times a lot of critics have attributed Tender Buttons, which was published in 1912, and we can see that this is also the time of when modernism is like really picking up. So, Tender Buttons, for instance, is divided into three parts. Like there's one on food, one is titled subtitled objects, and there are the other one is rooms. So, food, objects, and rooms, and these are followed by lines in prose. Today, poetry is a very, very interesting domain, because poets experiment with writing, of course, in meter, in verse, but also in prose. So this kind of writing is something that Gertrude Stein experiments with. But she denied what was called automatic writing. It's interesting that her writing is very close to what in fiction, of course, we call streams of consciousness. And of course, within modernism, not just, it's not genre specific, but the movement that we refer to as streams of consciousness. Stein was, of course, or she was also referred to by her mentor, William James, as the most brilliant woman student. And, she was encouraged to join the Johns Hopkins Medical School. However, she left it, after about 4 years. So, here is a portrait of Gertrude Stein by Picasso. This is from about 1905 to 6. And so, if we look at the writings, Stein wrote books such as Three Lives, which is about working class women. It was published in 1909. Then there is The Making of Americans. There is, of course, QED, which is one of the early, coming out stories about same-sex relationships. And Gertrude Stein also discovers her own sexuality in time, and she has her partner Alice Toklas. So she wrote, in fact, the autobiography of Alice P. Toklas in 1933 in the voice of her partner. So again, if we look at, as mentioned earlier, that her work, we see writing and art in a sense kind of coming together. And here art is used in the sense not just of the work itself, but the style. So, for instance, one can see the impact of Cubism in a very big way in her work. To introduce, Gertrude Stein and her work to you. So here is a short poem, which of course is, it appears to be very straightforward and simple. And as we move on to stanzas and meditation, we will see an entirely different style. But the question that one has to ask is that here are words on the page that convey one kind of meaning. Is this the only meaning that Stein is trying to convey? So please think about this. The house was, this is, the poem is titled, The House Was Just Twinkling in the Moonlight. The house was just twinkling in the moonlight, and inside it, twinkling with delight, is my baby bright. Twinkling with delight in the house, twinkling with the moonlight. Bless my baby bright. Bless my baby, twinkling with delight. In the house, twinkling in the moonlight. Her hubby dear loves to cheer when he thinks, and he always thinks when he knows, and he always knows that his blessed baby wifey is all here, and he is all hers, and sticks to her like burrs, blessed baby. So, if you look at this, there's quite a twist towards the end of the poem. So the objective description is given to us. There's a house that is twinkling in the moonlight. What is striking is that, how does a house twinkle in the moonlight? So, you eyes twinkle, stars twinkle. How is it that a house twinkles in the moonlight? And inside it, twinkling with delight is my baby bright. It's interesting to note that usually when we talk about a baby in a house, and we use phrases like twinkling with delight, so one might literally think of a baby. But here, as the lines later tell us, that is blessed baby wifey. So the reference here is to the figure of the wife. Twinkling with delight in the house twinkling. Now, one of the striking aspects about Gertrude Stein's style of writing, of her poetry, is alliteration and repetition. Repetition is very important. So, if you just look at this particular, these lines that we are looking at, so twinkling is used so many times. In the first line itself, there's twinkling, then again, and inside it, twinkling with delight, and then so twinkling in the moonlight, twinkling with delight, and then there is again a repetition. Twinkling with delight in the house, twinkling with the moonlight. So the woman here is referred to as the baby bride, and she is the one, and this woman is the wife. She is the one who is twinkling with delight in the house that is twinkling with the moonlight. The question to be asked here is, what is the function of repetition? Why is Stein using repetition so many times? I mean, why is she using repetition at all? So, because somewhere it draws attention to the role of the woman within the household. And if you look at it further, bless my baby bright. So here again, you bless somebody who's younger, you bless somebody who's junior, and here it is the wife that is being blessed. So bless my baby, twinkling with delight. In the house, twinkling in the moonlight. Her hubby dear. So now the figure of the husband appears in this poem. Her hubby dear loves to cheer. So look at the rhyme, hubby dear loves to cheer. When he thinks, and he always thinks, when he knows, and he always. So, and he always knows. So, if we look at the figure of the husband here, how has the figure of the husband been depicted? So, where the wife has been depicted as the baby of the house who's twinkling with delight, almost as if she was this, a toddler or a little baby jumping with delight, looking at things in the house. And the house itself is, twinkling. So, the husband, of course, is very happy when he thinks, and he always thinks, when he knows. So, which means that knowledge and thinking, both these aspects are roles that are assigned to the husband. So, and he always knows that his blessed baby wifey is all here, and he is all hers. So, here, of course, there is a commitment here that is spelled out that the wife is always there, and he is also all hers. But it is the pillar of this house that is twinkling in the moonlight. This pillar is the wife. It is the woman in the home. And knowledge, and he always knows. So look at the role that repetition plays here. He thinks and he always thinks. So of course, which means that the husband thinks that he knows it all. And when he knows, he always knows. So again, by the repetition, the second time, he always knows undercuts the first when he knows. So the fact that the blessed baby wifey is here, and he, of course, belongs to her, so to say, and sticks to her like burrs. Now, burrs, have the burrs. The word burr has multiple meanings. It has a sound. It is also a kind of instrument. So and this instrument can also irritate, but he sticks to her like burrs. So the burrs are also used in a sense, for kind of smoothing surfaces. So here, what is the reason that Gertrude Stein is using the word burrs? At least to my mind here, it almost appears as if there is. It's almost like sticking to her is like almost like an irritant, and blessed baby. So is all hers and sticks to her like burrs, blessed baby. Now, Gertrude Stein herself was in a same-sex relationship with Aristocles, and from Stein's perspective, this house of bliss, so to say, is constantly undercut by repetition. And it's not as if Stein is at any point, I think the only word that kind of gives away is burrs. But throughout this poem, the one thing that constantly undercuts the so-called happiness of a house that is twinkling in moonlight, of the woman at home who is blissfully there, she's like the baby of the house, and the two people are dedicated to each other. So this entire paradigm, or a patriarchal paradigm, is undercut, and very by using wordplay, by using rhyme scheme, by using repetition, Stein is constantly undercutting this. And the high point then in this particular poem is when she says that he thinks and he always thinks, he knows and he always knows. And what is the knowledge that he has? That within patriarchy, the wife is always going to hold fort. She will always be there. So these, in a sense, coming from a position of, coming from Stein's position, where same-sex relationships challenge patriarchal assumptions, the question here is about Stein's depiction of these two roles, that of the husband and that of the wife. It's almost as if there is this sense of, infantilization of the woman in the house, who's supposed to be the pillar, but she's not the one who's thinking. It is the man who is thinking. And she is, the blessed baby, so to say. Another, if we actually look at the time period, then an interesting thing is that this kind of, reference to women as baby and blessed baby and so on, one is reminded of Ibsen's very famous play, A Doll's House. And in A Doll House, Ibsen is constantly challenging, this kind of a patriarchal portrayal of the woman of the house, that is the wife, who is projected as somebody who is referred to in terms of a bird or in terms of a baby and so on, but never as that human being who has an identity of her own and who has a mind that she thinks. So this poem, with the title that, the house was just twinkling in the moonlight. The house was just twinkling. So I think the, word here is very, very important. And, one also looks at Stein and Toklas's very, very happy relationship, where Stein would write all night and Toklas would take a look at her notes and, type it out the next day. So with this, we come to a very different style of writing in the case of Gertrude Stein. So here, of course, language is still relatively simpler, in the sense that one looks at repetition and looks at the potential of repetition to challenge stereotypes. And here there is another poem, and I'd like to draw attention to the way in which language is becoming more complex in Stein's writing. So a carafe, that is a blind glass. A kind in glass, and even if we don't look at the meaning in this particular poem, it's important to pay attention to the continuous prose writing and to how different ideas are actually packed together in one very, very short poem that this is. A kind in glass and a cousin, a spectacle and nothing strange, a single hurt colour and an arrangement in a system to pointing. All this and not ordinary, not unordered in not resembling, the difference is spreading. So, this is it, this is the poem. And if we look at just the first line, so glass, let's look at the objects that are kind of placed together, juxtaposed. Glass, cousin, spectacle, color, arrangement. It's almost as if when we look at modernist writing in the novel, as I said, it could be James Joyce or it could be a writer like Virginia Woolf who's written Mrs. Dalloway. So, how the mind functions, and the mind never functions in a linear sort of manner where one event is going to logically and consequentially follow from the previous one. So, this kind of linear logic is completely defied, is completely denied. And it is by denying this logic that a poet like Gertrude Stein, and her poetry is very complex for that reason. So, if we try to kind of summarize it, or if we try to reduce it to, let's say, 2 or 3 objective points that we can take away, it is not going to be possible, because Stein is using poetry to reflect on also the way in which the mind juxtaposes very, very divergent objects around it. So, all this and yet not ordinary. So, all this is there and yet not ordinary, not unordered in not resembling. The difference is spreading. So, here this poem was shared so that we can look at the different style that emerges in her poetry. With this we come to a poem that we can only touch upon in a very, very a brief manner, not even overview, because it is a very long poem. Stanzas in Meditation is massive because it's a poem of 164 stanzas. It's divided into 5 parts. It's in 164 stanzas and 149 pages. It runs into many, many pages, and it was written in 1933, but it was published in complete form only in 1956. So, when we look at a few excerpts from part 1 of Stanzas in Meditation, because part 1 itself has about 15 stanzas, and if we just look at part 1, we can look at it both at the level of form and meaning. Who really speaking are the actors in this particular, who are the characters in this particular long poem that we have. And so, the questions are related to form, the questions are related to meaning. And if we look at the title itself, Stanzas in Meditation. So, here what we were discussing about the way in which poetry is used to capture certain structures in the mind, the way in which the mind captures different images, reflects on different aspects, and these can be divergent. The difference is spreading, as is written in the previous poem. So, if the difference is spreading, then these divergent constructs are strung together in a poem. So, Gertrude Stein, it's interesting that in 1933, around that time when she is writing Stanzas in Meditation, this is also the time that she is working on her autobiography, which is which is referred to as the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, because she uses her partner's persona to write. And an autobiography, one would expect a certain kind of what Ulla E. Dido calls a kind of chronological, sequential, string of events. But in this particular case, when we look at these two writings that are happening almost at the same time, they are very, very different. So, stanzas in meditation is, of course, putting together a lot of complex aspects of the way the mind functions, and also the way in which these can be written and represented in poetry. At the same time, there is another kind of writing which follows a certain sequence and is very different. So, the question then is, does meditation, really speaking, stanzas in meditation have nothing to do with Stein's life? Or is it, as critics have pointed out, it could possibly be the other autobiography? So, there are a lot of questions that come up with respect to Stein's writing, and we shall soon discuss these in detail.